Welcome to Behind the Business, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get real about running a profitable business. I'm Pamela Hilton, CPA, with over 30 years in accounting, tax, payroll, and business advisory services. Each week, I will share stories from the field, answering real questions from business owners, and give you the straight talk you need to grow and protect your business. No fluff, no hype, just practical advice that works in the real world. So let's get to it. Hey there, and welcome back to Behind the Business. In this episode, I would love to talk about millionaire bad habits. I work with a lot of seven-figure business owners, and it never ceases to amaze me. The bad habits that kind of carry over to my business owners, even though they've reached the seven-figure mark, but they still carry over these really bad habits from when they kind of first started their business. And when I have these prospecting calls with clients who are starting up their businesses, I always hear this: "Oh, my books are a mess. Oh, this is the worst. This is probably the worst you've ever seen." And I try to explain to them, you all start out the same. Everybody starts out their business exactly the same. We all start out on a spreadsheet. We all start out writing down our numbers on a piece of paper when we start out our businesses. Everybody starts out exactly the same. Every business on this planet has started out exactly the same. We all didn't start out with these crazy accounting software. We all started out the same. We started out writing down our income and expenses. Even the millionaires started out exactly the same. And some of the millionaires still carry over these really bad habits because sometimes they became millionaire businesses really quickly, and their businesses kind of shot up unexpectedly, and they don't have time to put in place the solid foundation that they needed to support the seven-figure business that became. So in an ideal world, when you build your business, you want to have a really strong foundation underneath. You want to, there's a step process to building a really strong foundation of your business. And sometimes that doesn't happen when you reach seven figures. It happens really quickly. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes there's no excuse for the bad habits, and sometimes there are. I'm going to share some stories that I've seen along the way, some with clients, some that I've heard from other professionals, and they're funny, and I'm just going to share these with you to commiserate, and so that for anyone who is hearing out there, you're not alone. Everybody does crazy things, and you learn from other mistakes, okay? Because everybody makes the same mistakes out there. So a lot of people still feel like they can do their own accounting. Most people out there feel like they can do their own accounting, and I blame the marketing out there. And there is very superb marketing out there that encourages people to do their own bookkeeping and accounting. And the fact of the matter is that accounting is very complex, and AI is fabulous out there, but you really don't want AI to be doing your accounting. You really want to have your pulse. You really want to be overseeing your accounting, because at the end of the day, you want to know what's going on in your business. So you want your software to do some of it, but you don't want your software doing all of it. You don't want your software to be doing all of the accounting and interpreting for you. You want to be looking at the numbers, and you want to make sure it's correct, because you want to catch mistakes. You want to see what's going on. You want to see the processing, make sure that things are going through the process correctly. You want to have your eye on things because it's your business. DIYing it, letting the software just kind of do its thing is a big mistake, and DIYing it are two of the biggest mistakes I see millionaires doing. Not having a bookkeeper and doing it themselves, and letting the software kind of just plugging it in, just linking their bank account, and just letting the bank feed run wild, and setting up the automations and just letting it do its thing. I see that as a huge mistake, with some of the millionaires, 6 and 7 figure business owners that I see, is a huge mistake, because there's nobody steering the ship. And that's a recipe for disaster in any business, but especially in a 7-figure business, because there's more at stake. Usually in a 7-figure business, you have employees that you're supporting multiple families. There's a bigger trickle down. You're supporting multiple families here. So I see that as a huge mistake with 7-figure businesses. That's right up there at the top of the mistakes, is the DIYing and not having somebody steering that ship. You have to have somebody at the helm there of the accounting. If you are a 7-figure business owner and you do not have a CFO, an accounting manager, you can well afford that. And it's a crime. It's a crime in my book that you can afford that and you're not paying for that, because it's something that will pay for itself. And, it's just, I could go on and on about that. I could talk for a whole half hour on that. Yeah, if you have a 7-figure business and if you don't have somebody doing that and managing that, that's just crazy. Taking advice from non-professionals, and this is kind of in the same vein as that. If you are a 7-figure business and you do not have a team of professionals on board at that point in your business, that's also a crime. So I talked about this in my very first podcast about having your team of advisors, and you should have a solid team at this point. CPA is a must. If you do not have a CPA preparing your taxes, that's another one. If you're DIYing your taxes still, no way. You can well afford a CPA. If you do not have a CPA on board, a lawyer, financial planner, insurance person, insurance broker, insurance agent, payroll company, who did I forget? CPA, lawyer, insurance broker, a bank on board, a bank and business banking person, payroll company. Did I forget somebody? You have to have this team on board already. You have to have this network that you're working with already on board. If you do not have these people already set up and vetted, this professional team that you're working with, you should at this point. If you're a millionaire, a 7-figure business owner, this is something that you should already have in place or working towards. Because at this level of the game, I have clients like this, and I've seen this a bit. And the excuse I see is that these 7-figure business owners are kind of running around, they're chickens with their heads cut off, right? They're too busy. They're millionaires, they're too busy running their business. And that's just crazy. You should be delegating all of this. If you're at that level and you aren't delegating and you haven't risen yourself, you're not running, your business is still running. You should have elevated yourself out of the business and you should have delegated all this by now. And if you haven't, then your business is still running you. So you should have this team in place so that you've elevated yourself a little bit more. So all of those things should be in place so that you've got these advisors doing their thing, advising you. So not having those teams and still taking these advice from people who aren't those professionals. Taking advice from people who aren't those professionals and getting bad advice now. I see that a lot. I see those mistakes quite a bit from people getting advice, and I see people coming to me after the fact, getting advice and doing these things. I have people, 7-figure business owners coming to me. They've done things during the year. I'm like, what? What did you do? Oh, I sold part of my business. What do you mean you sold part of your business? I had a client who sold half of his business during the year. I'm like, well, you can't just sell half of your business. What do you mean? And undoing that and trying to do the accounting and then do the tax return because half of the business was sold and some of the assets were sold out of the business was a little bit of a nightmare because he had not even mentioned it to me, his CPA. So those sorts of things, when you're a seven-figure business owner and then not seeking the advice of the professionals you do have, and then just not kind of like ignoring, I see that quite a bit. What I also see, and it's kind of along that same line, is because they have millions or multi-million, not thinking they need either the tax planning or the retirement planning, because they don't need retirement funds. And that's yes and no. Maybe they don't need retirement planning, but we use, as tax professionals, we use retirement planning as a tax strategy sometimes, a lot of the times. So when I talk to clients at the end of the year and we are trying to create strategies for clients and we suggest things, I have clients who just kind of ignore some of these strategies because they're like, oh, we don't need to do that because we have all of these millions in the bank. And it's like, well, no, it's not really for some of these things. These insurance strategies and these retirement account strategies you don't really necessarily need them for retirement, or you don't really need them for insurance purposes, but they're for other purposes. They're for other purposes. And so for them, they don't really see the bigger picture sometimes when we're talking about planning and strategizing and tax planning. And then they inevitably sort of pay more taxes for some reason. Because they're sort of like, these newer millionaires, right? They're not part of these other 1%ers who aren't paying the taxes. They're these business millionaires that we have now who are still paying these crazy amount of taxes that they don't need to, because they're these newer business millionaires who are still kind of DIYing things. They're not listening to the tax advice and the tax strategies they need to. And it's a little frustrating for us. So they're making these mistakes that they really don't need to, because they are not listening to any advice. And it all really kind of goes all the way back to that DIY mentality when they were a much smaller business. When they were a much smaller business and they were first starting out, they were DIYing their accounting. They were DIYing their bookkeeping. And that mentality has been retained even though they're making much more money and they've become a seven-figure business owner, and they've retained that mentality, and it's hard to break that habit. So if there's any advice I could give you as a business owner is you really need to break out of that DIY mentality, because if you bring that through once you're making decent profits, it's really going to cripple you as a business. And that DIY mentality translates to paying higher taxes. It really, really does. Oh, here's another thing that I see some of the mistakes that my seven-figure business owners make to try to compensate for the higher taxes that they're paying, instead of trying to take the advice of the retirement plans, because they don't think they need the retirement plans and they don't think they need the life insurance. I see a lot of these seven-figure business owners try these very trendy, and they're kind of they're these gray area. I don't want to use the word scheme, but they're these very gray area tax programs that they want to use. They're charitable programs, they're these conservation programs, they are these tax codes and they're kind of these one and done programs that they get into, that they buy into to get these tax deductions or tax credits. And some of them are these kind of gray area, and then there are high buy-ins, but they get these really high tax deductions for them, and they're high auditable ones. and they may or may not send up red flags to the IRS. They're not something that I would recommend on a regular basis. But these are the ones that really attract these 7-figure business owners. And I get why, because they're a lot of bang for their buck, but for obvious reasons. They are ones that are on the IRS's radar because of that. And I really try to encourage my clients to use other tax strategies that are proven, that are longer, that they can use year after year after year, that are safe, that are effective, and that require a little more strategy. And that they are just as equally give you a little more bang for the buck, that are just as very, very safe, and that are just very well within the tax code. And there's plenty of them. There are a lot of them out there that are not crazy, schemes that are out there. There's plenty of them out there that you can use, that we use all the time. And then there's a lot of them out there that you're going to see that are clickbait on social media that kind of prey upon they're clickbait, that are they prey upon some unsuspecting scrollers out there that don't apply to you, that you're going to click on, you're going to sign up for their masterclass, that don't really apply to you. So I just be careful about that. But I see this mistake a lot with 7-figure business owners. They get kind of sucked into these schemes that are kind of in the gray area, that are on the IRS's audit list. And it's not really worth it. Yes, you will probably get a huge deduction for 1 year and 1 year only, but I prefer to steer my high net worth clients, to other things that are proven. And if you're working with a really reputable CPA, there's so many other things you can do. There's just a ton of things you can do to structure things within your business, with payroll, with the way your entities are structured. There's tons of things you can do to lower your tax bill in a way that you don't have to do those things. So that's what I see with lots of mistakes with millionaire 7-figure business owners. The other thing I see a lot is that they make their accounting, and this kind of goes back to not having the CFO and not having the controller out there. They make their accounting, either they're DIYing their accounting or they've gone the complete opposite direction. They've made their accounting so incredibly complicated. They've overcomplicated it. And it's made it so complicated and convoluted that even I can't figure out what's going on with their accounting. And if I can't figure out what's going on with their accounting, guess what? If you get audited, the IRS isn't going to be able to figure out your accounting either. And that's a little scary. You don't have to overcomplicate things. Just keep it simple. Use the software how the software is meant to be used. You don't have to recreate the wheel with the software. Keep the chart of accounts really simple, and then just, use the reports, balance sheet, profit and loss, statement of cash flows. Use the software how it's meant to be done, and then use the filters on the reports to make them a little more complex if you want to. What are you really trying to achieve? I guess if you're trying to drill down that far, I guess I would suggest just really working with your CPA and trying to work with them and just go with that. What is the goal here? And try to achieve it in the simplest way possible. And just don't mess with the accounting system, and try to find ways to come to the goal. Because when you start overcomplicating the accounting system, you really can't go back and make it simpler. You know what I mean? Keep the accounting system simple, and then maybe create something afterwards. Keep the reports very simple. And I see this, sometimes that They've overcomplicated things, and it makes it's really hard to undo once you've created this crazy system, because then once you've got this really convoluted system of transfers and things that are off the books and then on the books, and then it's over here and then it's over there, and you've got multiple entities with transfers in and out of these books, if you ever get audited, God forbid, and you've got things going into your personal account and out of this, and it's just really going to be difficult to explain all of these things in an audit if you've got this crazy accounting system and it's not very straightforward. It's just going to look really bad. It's going to be hard to explain. And then you are going to have to just produce more documents to the IRS. And that's fine if you're, a 5-figure business, a 6-figure business. But when you're a 7-figure business, that's just way more documents you're going to have to produce to the IRS. So that's a big mistake I see with some of my 7-figure business owners, is that they've just got it way, way, way overcomplicated, and it's a little bit of a nightmare. So those are some of the things I see these $1 million business owners, 7-figure business owners make. And some of my clients who come to me, some of my smaller business owners who come to me who think that they don't have it all together. Nobody does. No one does. Even these bigger businesses who you see these influencers on social media, I can say most of them who you think have their act together probably don't. And their accounting systems and their taxes are probably just as messed up as yours, and maybe even more so. And they probably have taxes that haven't been filed. So don't feel so bad about your messy books, about how behind you are on your taxes, because the influencer you see who are making all those fabulous videos probably has really crappy accounting too. So don't feel so bad. Crazy stories happen to very nice people, and nobody has all their act together. And everybody, has horror stories about their books. So I hope this helps people realize that even 7-figure businesses make loads of mistakes, and it's okay, because when it comes to accounting and taxes, everything is fixable. There are no mistakes that can't be fixed. So this is our episode of Behind the Business. If you like what you hear, please share and subscribe. If you know a business owner who would benefit from listening to the podcast, please share and join us on the next episode of Behind the Business. Thanks for listening to Behind the Business. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with another business owner who could use some real world advice. For free resources, tools, and to submit your own business questions, head on over to my website, PamelaHiltonCPA.com. Until next time, keep building smart and keep looking behind the business.